Ambassador Zyxthel of the Veloran Collective had seen many strange things in her 300 years of diplomatic service. She had witnessed the birth of new species into galactic society. She had watched empires fall and rise again. She had even survived the Great Silence, when the Void Singers had tried to consume all communication across 6 star systems. But nothing had prepared her for humans. The emergency session of the Galactic Federation Council had been called at the 4th hour of the standard cycle. Representatives from 47 species filled the Great Chamber, their forms ranging from the crystalline sylph to the gaseous nebulari contained in their pressure suits. The air hummed with translation fields, converting the clicks, whistles, and telepathic pulses of 100 different languages into something each species could understand. At the center of the chamber stood High Chancellor Morvek, his 4 arms raised in the traditional gesture of importance. His gray skin reflected the light of the central holographic display, which showed a single word in Federation standard: emergency. "Fellow members of the Council," Morvek began, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had delivered too much bad news in too short a time. "We face a crisis unlike any in our recorded history." Zyxthel leaned forward in her seat. The Veloran were known for their patience, but even she felt the cold touch of worry in her secondary heart. "The Kreth swarm has awakened," Morvek continued. The chamber erupted. The sylph shattered into 1,000 arguing fragments before reforming. The nebulari pulsed with fear colors visible through their suits. Even the ancient Yith, who had seen the rise and fall of civilizations, stirred in their meditation pods. Zyxthel understood the reaction. The Kreth were not merely dangerous. They were a force of nature, a biological weapon left behind by some long-dead civilization. They consumed everything in their path, converting organic matter into more of themselves. The last time they had awakened, 700 years ago, they had destroyed 18 inhabited worlds before finally being contained. "Our projections show they will reach the outer colonies within 3 cycles," Morvek said, waiting for the noise to die down. "Our military forces are mobilizing, but preliminary simulations suggest—" He paused, his 4 hands trembling slightly. "The simulations suggest a 93% probability of total defeat." The chamber fell silent. Total defeat. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "However," Morvek continued, "there may be another option." The holographic display changed, showing a small blue-green world on the edge of Federation space. Earth. 3 cycles ago, we granted provisional membership to the species known as humans, Morvek said. "At the time, we considered them a minor addition to our collective. Their technology was primitive. Their military capabilities were limited. They had barely begun exploring beyond their own star system." Zyxthel remembered the vote. She had abstained, uncertain what to make of the strange bipeds who seemed to spend as much time fighting each other as they did advancing their civilization. "Since their admission, our researchers have been studying human culture, history, and psychology," Morvek continued. "What they have discovered is remarkable." The display changed again, showing a series of images. Humans climbing impossible mountains. Humans crossing vast oceans in wooden boats. Humans walking on their own moon using technology that was laughably primitive by Federation standards. "Humans possess a psychological trait that appears to be unique in the known galaxy," Morvek said. "Our researchers have struggled to translate it properly, but the closest approximation is stubbornness." A ripple of confusion passed through the chamber. The translator field struggled with the concept, producing various approximations: persistence, determination, refusal to accept reality. "The humans have a phrase," Morvek continued. "They say, 'It is not over until it is over.' At first, our researchers believed this was simply poor grammar, but they have come to understand it differently. Humans do not accept defeat. They do not surrender to impossible odds. They continue fighting long after logic dictates they should stop." He gestured, and the display showed historical records from Earth. Small groups of humans holding positions against overwhelming forces. Scientists spending decades on problems that all rational analysis suggested were unsolvable. Individuals surviving conditions that should have killed them, purely through refusal to die. When faced with a 93% probability of defeat, Morvek said, most species would seek terms of surrender or attempt to flee. Humans, we have learned, would see this as a challenge. Zeichsel's diplomatic training kicked in. She raised her primary manipulator in the gesture of request to speak. "High Chancellor," she said, "are you suggesting we ask the humans to fight the Kreth? Their technology is centuries behind ours. Their military forces are tiny compared to our combined fleets." "I am suggesting something different, Ambassador," Morvek replied. "I am suggesting we learn from them." The display changed once more, showing a human face. The creature was unremarkable by galactic standards. 2 eyes, 1 mouth, soft skin that would provide no protection against even the weakest predator. Yet there was something in those eyes, something that made Zeichsel's secondary heartbeat faster. "This is General Sarah Chen," Morvek said. "She has been assigned as the human liaison to our military command. When we informed her of the Kreth threat and our probability calculations, she laughed." Another ripple of confusion. Laughter was a complex behavior that meant different things to different species. To the Veloran, it indicated surrender to absurdity. To the Nebulari, it was a mating call. To humans, apparently, it meant something else entirely. She said, and I quote, 93% chance of failure. I have had worse odds at my Tuesday poker games." Morvek's 4 hands made the gesture of profound significance. "Fellow members of the Council, I propose that we do something unprecedented. I propose that we add human stubbornness to our list of strategic resources. I propose that we ask the humans not to fight for us, but to teach us how to refuse to lose." The chamber erupted again, but this time the noise was different. Hope, Zeichsel realized. For the first time since the announcement, she heard hope. General Chen stood at the window of the Federation Military Command Center, looking out at the assembled fleet. Ships from dozens of species hung in the darkness of space, their designs as varied as the beings who crewed them. Elegant Veloran cruisers with their flowing lines. Blocky Morathi carriers built for function rather than form. Crystalline Sylph vessels that seemed to grow rather than be built. And among them, small and crude by comparison, the human ships, the carrier USS Independence, the destroyer squadron's Courage and Defiance, a handful of frigates with names like Stubborn, Unbreakable, and Never Say Die. Captain James Rivera approached her, his reflection appearing in the window beside hers. "The alien brass think we're crazy," he said. Chen smiled. "They are not wrong. Our ships are outclassed by everything out there. Our weapons are primitive. Our shields can barely stop a moderate asteroid, let alone Kreth bioweapons." "Also true." Rivera was quiet for a moment. "So why are you smiling, General?" Chen turned to face him. She was not a tall woman, and decades of military service had left their mark on her face. But her eyes held the same fire that had carried her from the slums of Chicago to the highest ranks of Earth's military. "Because they asked for our help," she said. "Not our ships, not our weapons, our stubbornness. They looked at the most stubborn species in their entire federation and said, 'We need humans.'" She laughed, that same laugh that had so confused High Chancellor Morvek. "Captain, we have spent our entire history fighting each other, fighting nature, fighting the universe itself. And now, finally, we have an enemy worthy of that fight." Rivera nodded slowly. "The Kreth." "The Kreth have never faced anything like us," Chen said. "They destroy everything in their path because everything runs from them or dies quickly. They have never encountered a species that will keep fighting after all hope is gone. They have never met humans." The strategic planning session began 3 hours later. Representatives from every major military power in the Federation gathered in the central war room, a vast circular chamber filled with holographic displays and translation equipment. The Kreth swarm was shown in terrifying detail, billions of organisms moving as one, consuming entire planets in days. "Our standard tactics will not work," Admiral Thrixkel of the Morathi said, his insectoid mandibles clicking with frustration. "We have run 17,000 simulations. In every scenario where we follow our established military doctrine, we lose." General Chen stood at the central display, studying the swarm patterns. The aliens around her towered over her small frame, their advanced technology making her tablet computer look like a child's toy. None of that mattered. "Show me the simulation where you came closest to winning," she said. The display changed, showing a recreation of a battle where Federation forces had managed to destroy 60% of the swarm before being overwhelmed. "What was different?" Chen asked. "The commanders made several errors in judgment," Admiral Thrixkel said, sounding embarrassed. "They refused to retreat when our models indicated they should. They continued attacking after their ships were critically damaged. They acted like humans," Chen said. Silence fell over the room. "Your simulations assume rational actors," Chen continued. "They assume that when defeat becomes probable, forces will withdraw. They assume that damaged ships will stop fighting. They assume that commanders will follow logical strategies." She smiled. "We need to teach you how to be irrational." Ambassador Zeichsel stepped forward. She had requested permission to observe the strategic sessions, wanting to understand these strange creatures better. "General Chen," she said, "what you describe sounds like suicide. Continuing to fight when victory is impossible is not strategy. It is waste." "With respect, Ambassador, that is where you are wrong," Chen said. "The Kreth have spent millions of years fighting species that give up. Their entire strategy is based on overwhelming force, breaking resistance quickly, and moving on. They have never faced an enemy that simply refuses to break." She pulled up historical records from Earth: the Battle of Thermopylae, the Siege of Stalingrad, the defense of Wake Island. "These are examples from our history," she said. "In each case, smaller forces held against impossible odds, not because they could win, but because holding mattered. Because every moment they held, something else became possible." "But they all died," Thrixkel observed. "Some of them," Chen agreed. "But what they bought with their lives changed history. The enemies they faced expected quick victory. Instead, they got something else. They got humans who refused to quit." She zoomed the display out, showing the projected path of the Kreth swarm. "The swarm will hit the outer colonies first," she said. "Standard Federation doctrine calls for evacuation and retreat, correct?" "That is correct," Thrixkel confirmed. "We cannot defend those positions. The mathematical certainty of defeat is—" "I am not interested in mathematical certainty," Chen interrupted. "I am interested in buying time. Every day we delay the swarm is another day for evacuations to complete, another day for reinforcements to arrive, another day for our scientists to find a weakness we can exploit." She began marking positions on the display. "We do not need to win every battle," she said. "We need to make every battle cost the swarm more than they expected. We need to make them bleed for every light year. We need to show them that this time their prey bites back." The alien commanders looked at each other uncertainly. This was not how war was conducted. This was not how rational beings fought. "There is a human saying," Chen said, seeing their hesitation. "We say, if you are going through hell, keep going. The Kreth are hell. We cannot avoid them. We cannot outrun them. But we can make their journey through us so painful that they will remember it for eternity." High Chancellor Morvek, who had been observing from the back of the room, finally spoke. "General Chen, you are asking us to abandon everything we know about warfare. You are asking us to fight in a way that our species find deeply uncomfortable. Yes, Chen said simply. And you believe this will work? Chen met his gaze. In that moment, she looked nothing like the primitive representative of a newly spacefaring species. She looked like something older, something forged in fire and blood, and 10,000 years of refusing to surrender. I believe that we have no choice, she said. I believe that the alternative is extinction, and I believe that when faced with extinction, stubbornness is not just a trait, it is a weapon. The silence stretched. Then slowly, High Chancellor Morvek made the gesture of agreement. Teach us, he said, teach us to be stubborn. General Chen smiled. With pleasure, Chancellor, let us begin. The training program started the next day. Human instructors were brought in from every military branch, every walk of life. Not just soldiers, but survivors. People who had beaten cancer. People who had lost everything and rebuilt from nothing. People who had been told they would never walk, never speak, never succeed, and had proved the universe wrong through sheer force of will. The aliens found it baffling. Why bring civilians to a military installation? Why share stories of personal tragedy when discussing battle tactics? Ambassador Zeichsel watched a human named Marcus Johnson address a group of Veloran tactical officers. Marcus was not a soldier. He was a farmer from a place called Kansas who had lost his farm to drought, lost his family to disease, lost his reason to live, and somehow kept living anyway. When everything falls apart, Marcus said, his voice rough with remembered pain, you have two choices. You can lie down and die, or you can plant another seed. A Veloran officer raised her manipulator. But what if the seed cannot grow? What if the soil is poison and the water is gone, and all rational analysis suggests that planting is futile? Marcus smiled, and there was something terrible in that smile. Something beautiful and terrible and utterly human. Then you plant it anyway, he said, because the seed does not know it cannot grow, because the universe has no right to tell you when to stop, because stubbornness is not about logic. It is about telling reality that you do not accept its terms. Zeichsel felt her secondary heart beating faster. She was beginning to understand. In another section of the command center, Captain Rivera was teaching Morathi combat pilots the art of refusing to eject. Your training tells you to preserve your life, he said. When your ship is critically damaged, you abandon it and try to survive. That is logical. That is reasonable. He pulled up footage from Earth's wars, showing pilots steering crippled aircraft into enemy targets. This is neither of those things. This is what we call taking them with you. The Morathi clicked their mandibles in distress. Self-sacrifice was not unknown to them, but this calculated, willing embrace of death as weapon was something else entirely. The Kreth expect you to flee, Rivera continued. They expect you to try to survive. What happens when you do not? What happens when a dying ship becomes a missile? What happens when retreat is removed as an option? An older Morathi, a veteran of the last Kreth emergence, spoke up. In the previous war, we lost because our forces broke. When casualties reached certain thresholds, our instinct for self-preservation overwhelmed our tactical training. We fled, and the swarm consumed us as we ran. Exactly, Rivera said. The Kreth are not actually invincible. They can be hurt. They can be damaged. But they count on you giving up before you can hurt them badly enough to matter. We are going to teach you not to give up. How? The Morathi asked. Rivera grinned. By showing you that giving up is the one option that guarantees defeat. Everything else, no matter how unlikely, is still fighting. 3 days before the swarm was projected to reach the first colony world, General Chen called a final strategy meeting. The war room was packed. Officers from every species stood shoulder to shoulder, tentacle to claw, unified for the first time in living memory. We have done what we can, Chen said. We have shared our training, our mindset, our stubbornness. Now we see if it was enough. She pulled up the battle plan. It was unlike anything the Federation had ever attempted. We are not going to win the first battle, she said. Let me be clear about that. The Kreth will take the outer colonies. They will push us back. By every conventional measure, the first engagement will be a defeat. Murmurs of unease rippled through the room. But it will be a different kind of defeat, Chen continued. It will be the kind of defeat that plants seeds, the kind of defeat that makes the enemy bleed, the kind of defeat that whispers to the universe, "We are not done yet." She highlighted the defense positions. Every station, every ship, every soldier will fight, not to win, not to survive, to cost, to delay, to make the swarm pay for every meter of space in bodies they cannot easily replace. And when we fall back, we will fall back slowly. We will fall back fighting. We will fall back with our teeth in their throat. Ambassador Zeichsel spoke up. General, many of us will die. Yes, Chen said simply. And you still believe this is the right strategy? Chen was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the room. Ambassador, I come from a species that has spent its entire existence dying. We die in wars. We die from disease. We die from natural disasters and accidents and simple bad luck. And yet we are still here. Do you know why? Zeichsel shook her head. Because dying is not the same as losing, Chen said. Losing is when you stop trying. Losing is when you give up. Every human who has ever died fighting for something they believed in won something, even if they did not live to see it. They won because they refused to lose. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of beings from dozens of different worlds. Tomorrow we go to war. Some of us will not come back, but none of us, not a single one, will give up. And that, my friends, is how we win, not by being stronger, not by being smarter, but by being too stubborn to admit defeat. The room was silent. Then slowly, High Chancellor Morvik stepped forward. His four hands moved in the gesture of deepest respect. General Chen, he said, on behalf of the Galactic Federation Council, I formally add human stubbornness to our list of strategic resources. May it serve us well in the days to come. Chen saluted, a human gesture that the aliens had come to understand. It will, Chancellor, because it is the one resource that cannot be depleted. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. The next morning, the fleet departed for war. At the front of the formation, flying with ships 1,000 years more advanced, the small human vessels held their position. On the hull of the USS Independence, someone had painted two words in letters large enough to be seen from space. Never surrender. The first battle happened at the colony world of Nexus 7. It was a small planet, barely populated, of little strategic value. By all rational measures, it should have been abandoned without a fight. General Chen had other plans. The Kreth swarm arrived like a living storm, billions of organisms blocking out the stars. Their advance wave hit the defense platforms and tore through them like paper. The Federation forces had positioned their weakest ships at the front, crewed by volunteers who knew they would not survive. They did not run. On the bridge of the destroyer Valiant, Captain Teatrix of the Sylph felt his crystalline body cracking under the strain of sustained weapons fire. His ship was dying. His crew was dying. Every logical calculation told him to abandon the vessel and flee. Instead, he remembered the human training. He remembered Marcus Johnson talking about planting seeds in poisoned soil. He remembered the look in General Chen's eyes when she spoke about refusing to lose. All power to forward weapons, he commanded. Ram speed. His bridge crew, all Sylph, hesitated for only a moment. Then they obeyed. The Valiant plunged into the heart of the swarm, weapons blazing, shields failing, hull breaching. It killed thousands of Kreth organisms before it finally died. And as it died, Captain transmitted one final message to the fleet. We planted a seed, he said. Now water it with their blood. Across the battlefield, the message spread. Ships that should have retreated held their ground. Stations that should have been evacuated kept fighting. The Kreth, who expected quick victory, found themselves bogged down in a war of attrition unlike anything they had experienced. On the command ship, General Chen watched the battle unfold. The losses were staggering. The Federation was losing ships faster than predicted. By any conventional measure, they were being defeated. But the Kreth were being hurt too. "They are slowing down," Admiral Thrixkel observed, his mandibles clicking with surprise. "The swarm is confused. They are not advancing as fast as our models predicted." "They expected us to break," Chen said. "They expected us to run. Instead, we are making them fight for every inch, and that changes everything." The first battle of Nexus 7 lasted 37 hours. In the end, the Federation forces withdrew, leaving the planet to be consumed. They had lost 60% of their deployed vessels. By any standard measure, it was a catastrophic defeat. But the Kreth had lost too, not just organisms which they could replace, but time. Their advance had been delayed by 3 full days, 3 days that allowed 2 other colony worlds to complete their evacuations. 3 days that gave the Federation scientists more time to study captured Kreth samples. 3 days that proved human stubbornness could work. When the surviving ships returned to the main fleet, they were met not with shame but with celebration. High Chancellor Morvek himself addressed the crews. "You did what we believed was impossible," he said. "You fought without hope of victory and achieved something greater. You showed us that losing and giving up are not the same thing. You taught the Kreth that the Federation has learned a new way of war." General Chen stood beside him, exhausted but unbowed. "This is just the beginning," she said. "We will fall back. We will lose more battles, but every battle will cost them, and every day will buy us time. The Kreth have awakened to find a galaxy that has learned the one thing they never expected to encounter: stubbornness." In the medical bay, among the wounded from a dozen species, Ambassador Zyxthel found Captain T.H. The Sylph's crystalline body was cracked and dim, barely alive. The medical staff had done what they could, but his chances were slim. "Captain," she said softly, "why did you not eject? Why did you ram your ship into the swarm?" T.H.'s fractured voice was barely a whisper. "Because the seed does not know, it cannot grow." Zyxthel felt something shift inside her. For the first time in her 300 years, she understood what the humans meant by hope. "Rest, Captain," she said. "The seeds you planted will grow." The war continued. Battle after battle, world after world, the Federation fell back. The Kreth advanced, consuming everything in their path, but they advanced slowly, too slowly. Every day they expected quick victory, and every day they found only grinding resistance. Human advisors spread throughout the fleet, teaching their strange philosophy of refusal. Veloran cruisers learned to keep fighting with critical damage. Morathi fighters learned to turn destruction into weapon. Sylph vessels learned to shatter themselves into 1,000 cutting fragments rather than surrender. And the Kreth, for the first time in their ancient history, began to hesitate. General Chen saw it first, a pattern in their movements, a reluctance that had never been there before. "They are learning fear," she told High Chancellor Morvek. "Not of our weapons. Our weapons are still inferior to their biology. They are learning to fear our will." "Can fear stop them?" Morvek asked. Chen shook her head. "No, but it can slow them, and slow is all we need." In a secret facility deep in Federation space, scientists worked around the clock on captured Kreth organisms. They had discovered something unexpected: a weakness, a flaw in the swarm's biology that could be exploited. But they needed time, time to develop the weapon, time to produce it in sufficient quantities, time to distribute it across the fleet. Time that human stubbornness was buying, one battle at a time. General Chen looked at the strategic display, watching the red tide of the Kreth advance slowly across Federation space. They had lost so much, so many worlds, so many lives, By any rational measure, they were losing the war. But they had not lost yet, and as long as they had not lost, they could still win. "Keep fighting," she said, not knowing if anyone could hear her. "Keep planting seeds, the harvest will come." Somewhere in the darkness of space, the Kreth swarm moved forward. And for the first time in their existence, they moved forward with something that might have been doubt. The middle passage of the war was the hardest. 12 colony worlds fell in rapid succession. The Federation lost ships by the hundreds, soldiers by the thousands. The Kreth advance seemed unstoppable, a biological tide washing across the stars. But the tide was slowing. General Chen stood in the war room, studying the advance rates. The numbers told a story that no one had expected. "They should have reached the inner systems by now," she said. "By their initial rate of advance, they should be threatening the core worlds. Instead, they are still 3 jumps away." Admiral Thrixkel clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Our resistance has been more effective than projected, but we are running out of ships, running out of soldiers, running out of worlds to sacrifice." "How long until the weapon is ready?" Chen asked. 27 days, a Veloran scientist replied. "We need 27 days to produce enough of the agent to affect the entire swarm." Chen looked at the map. 27 days. The Kreth could consume a dozen more worlds in that time, millions more lives. "Then we hold for 27 days, she said, "no matter what it costs." The next battle happened at the Trilith Cluster, a group of mining stations that produced most of the Federation's rare minerals. Losing them would be a significant blow, but losing them slowly would buy the time they needed. Chen deployed her most experienced commanders, both human and alien, to the cluster. The defenders knew their mission: not to win, not to survive, to hold. Captain Rivera took command of the human contingent, 7 ships against a swarm of millions. His flagship, the cruiser Unbreakable, had earned its name in 3 previous engagements. "All ships, this is Captain Rivera," he broadcast. "We hold until relieved or until there is nothing left to hold. The fleet needs 27 days. We give them 27 days." The Kreth hit the Trilith Cluster like a hammer. The first wave of defenders evaporated in minutes. The second wave lasted longer, using every trick the humans had taught them. When their ships were crippled, they kept firing. When their weapons failed, they rammed. When ramming was impossible, they exploded their reactors and took as many Kreth with them as they could. Ambassador Zyxthel, who had insisted on accompanying the fleet as an observer, watched from a safe distance. She had seen war before. She had seen death before. But she had never seen anything like this. "They are not retreating," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "Even as they die, they are not retreating." Beside her, a human officer named Lieutenant Kim nodded. "We do not know how to retreat, Ambassador. It was not part of the training." That is madness." Kim smiled sadly. "That is being human." On the 4th day of the battle, the Unbreakable took a direct hit that killed half her crew and destroyed most of her weapons. Captain Rivera, bleeding from a head wound, refused to abandon ship. "We can still fly," he said, "and as long as we can fly, we can fight." The Unbreakable limped toward the heart of the swarm, all remaining power diverted to engines. She crashed into a Kreth carrier organism at full speed, triggering a chain reaction that destroyed an entire cluster of the enemy. Rivera's last transmission was picked up by every ship in the fleet. 23 more days, he said, "give them hell." The Battle of Trilith Cluster lasted 8 days. When it was over, the mining stations were consumed, and every defending ship was destroyed. By any measure, it was a defeat. But it was a defeat that cost the Kreth dearly. Their advance was delayed. Their momentum was broken. And for the first time, the swarm showed signs of something that might have been caution. General Chen received the news of Rivera's death in silence. They had served together for 15 years. He had been her friend, her advisor, her most trusted commander. Now he was gone. "How many days did they buy us?" she asked, her voice carefully controlled. 8 days, Admiral Thrixkel replied. "The weapon development is now 19 days from completion." Chen nodded. 8 days, thousands of lives, one more battle in an endless war. "Then it was worth it," she said, and she believed it even as her heart broke. The final 19 days were a blur of battles, retreats, and desperate stands. The Federation fell back and back, trading space for time. The Kreth advanced steadily but never fast enough. On the 16th day, the weapon was completed. It was a biological agent, designed to interfere with the swarm's collective consciousness. It would not kill the Kreth outright, but it would disrupt their coordination, turning them from a unified hive mind into billions of confused individuals. "We need to deliver it to the heart of the swarm," the lead scientist explained. "The distribution nodes are located near the center of their formation. Any ship that attempts to reach them will be destroyed long before arrival." General Chen looked at the tactical display. The scientist was right. The center of the swarm was suicide. No ship could survive long enough to deploy the weapon. "Then we need a different approach," she said. The plan that emerged was pure human stubbornness. They would not send one ship. They would send 1,000. A wave of vessels, each carrying a portion of the weapon, each fighting toward the center until it was destroyed. Most would not make it, but some might. "The losses will be enormous," Admiral Thrixkel said. "This is not a battle. This is a sacrifice." "Yes," Chen agreed. "Will your people participate?" Thrixkel was silent for a long moment. Then he made the gesture of determination. "We have learned from humans," he said. "We have learned that some things are worth dying for. The Morathi will fly." One by one, the other species agreed. Veloran, Sylph, Nebulari, even the ancient Yith emerged from their meditation to volunteer. For the first time in history, the entire Federation was united in a single act of defiance. The final battle began at dawn fleet time. 1,000 ships moved toward the swarm, carrying humanity's most dangerous weapon, the refusal to give up. The Kreth met them with everything they had. Ships died by the hundreds in the first hour. The swarm seemed endless, an ocean of teeth and claws and hungry biology. But the Federation fleet did not stop. General Chen commanded from the flagship Hope, a massive Veloran cruiser that had been retrofitted with human technology. Around her, the bridge crew fought with grim determination. "Sector 7 is gone," an officer reported. "Sector 12 is at 15% strength. The Kreth are adapting to our tactics." "Keep pushing," Chen ordered. "The center is all that matters." The battle raged for hours. Ship after ship fell, each one fighting to the last moment. The swarm absorbed the punishment and kept coming. It seemed impossible. It seemed hopeless. But humans did not know how to accept hopeless. On the bridge of the destroyer Never Say Die, Lieutenant Kim watched her ship's last weapons fail. Around her, the crew was dead or dying. The ship was crippled, drifting toward the center of the swarm on momentum alone. But they were close, so close. "Computer," she said, her voice steady, "transfer all remaining power to the weapon payload. Prepare for deployment." "Warning," the computer replied. "Deployment at this range will expose this vessel to lethal levels of the agent." Kim smiled. "I know." She triggered the deployment. The weapon spread through the surrounding swarm, disrupting millions of Kreth organisms. And at the center of the chaos, Lieutenant Kim became one more human who refused to lose. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Ships deploying their payloads even as they died. Crews triggering the weapon with their last breaths. Thousands of individual acts of defiance, each one a seed planted in the heart of the swarm. And slowly, impossibly, the seeds began to grow. The Kreth started to falter. Their coordination broke down. Organisms that had moved as one began to scatter, confused and directionless. The hive mind that had made them invincible was shattering into billions of fragments. "It is working," Admiral Thrixkel reported, wonder in his voice. "The swarm is breaking apart." General Chen watched the tactical display, tears streaming down her face. They had done it. At terrible cost, they had done it. "All ships," she broadcast, "finish them. No mercy, no retreat. Make sure they never threaten anyone again." The final phase of the battle was less a fight than a cleanup. The confused Kreth organisms were hunted down and destroyed. The swarm that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years died in the cold of space, scattered and alone. When it was over, when the last Kreth had been eliminated, silence fell across the fleet. Then, slowly, a sound began. Human ships began playing music, old songs from Earth, songs about victory and loss and never giving up. Ambassador Zyxthel listened to the strange melodies, feeling something she had never felt before. Pride, not just in the victory, but in being part of something greater, part of a galaxy that had learned the power of stubbornness. High Chancellor Morvek's voice came over the fleet-wide channel. "The Kreth are destroyed," he said. "The galaxy is saved, and we owe our survival to a species we once considered primitive. Humans taught us that defeat is not final, that hope can be created from nothing, that sometimes the only thing standing between extinction and survival is the refusal to give up." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice trembled with emotion. "From this day forward, human stubbornness is not merely listed as a strategic resource. It is our most treasured possession. May we always have the wisdom to use it and the courage to share it." General Chen stood on her bridge, surrounded by the survivors of the final battle. They had lost so much, so many friends, so many ships, so many worlds. But they had won. "Captain Rivera," she said softly, thinking of her fallen friend, "we gave them hell." Somewhere in the void, she imagined she could hear his laugh. That stubborn, human laugh that refused to acknowledge defeat. The war was over. The galaxy was saved. And humanity had earned its place among the stars, not through technology or strength, but through the simple, powerful refusal to ever give up. The memorial ceremony was held 3 months after the final battle. The great chamber of the Galactic Federation Council had been transformed into a garden, with flowers from 1,000 worlds blooming in the soft light. Each species had contributed something, a symbol of growth and renewal. At the center of the garden stood a monument. It was not grand or elaborate. It was a simple stone pillar, carved with the names of every being who had died in the war against the Kreth. The list was long, so terribly long. General Chen stood before the monument, wearing her dress uniform for the first time since the war began. Around her, representatives of every species in the Federation had gathered. Even the ancient Yith had emerged from their meditation, their vast forms filling an entire section of the chamber. High Chancellor Morvek approached the podium, his 4 hands arranged in the gesture of solemn remembrance. "We gather today to honor the fallen," he said. "Those who gave their lives so that others might live, those who taught us that sacrifice is not the same as defeat." He turned to face the monument. "The names on this stone represent beings from 48 species. They came from different worlds, different cultures, different ways of thinking, but they all shared one thing in common. They refused to surrender." Morvek gestured, and a holographic display activated above the monument. It showed images from the war, ships charging into impossible odds, crews fighting to the last, the final assault on the Kreth swarm. "Before the humans joined our federation, we believed we understood courage. We believed we knew what it meant to fight. But the humans showed us something different. They showed us that true courage is not the absence of fear. It is the refusal to let fear stop you." He turned to face General Chen. "General, you have lost many friends in this war. You have lost ships and soldiers and pieces of your heart that can never be replaced, and yet you stand here today unbowed. How?" Chen was silent for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear. Because they would want me to stand, Chancellor. Because giving up would dishonor their sacrifice. Because being stubborn is not just about fighting wars. It is about living, about continuing, about refusing to let pain or loss or grief stop you from moving forward. She stepped toward the monument and placed her hand on the cold stone. Captain Rivera taught me that. Lieutenant Kim taught me that. Every human who has ever faced impossible odds and kept fighting taught me that. We do not give up. We do not surrender. We do not accept defeat. Not because we are too stupid to know when we are beaten, but because we know that as long as we keep fighting, we have not truly lost. Ambassador Zyxthel watched from the crowd, her eyes wet with what she now recognized as tears. The Veloran had learned the expression from humans. They had learned many things from humans. I have a proposal, Zyxthel said, stepping forward. One that I believe the council should consider. Morvek gestured for her to continue. Before the war, humans were provisional members of the Federation. Their status was uncertain. Their value was questioned. She paused, looking around the chamber. I believe that time has passed. I propose that humanity be granted full membership, with all rights and responsibilities. I propose that human stubbornness be recognized not just as a strategic resource, but as a gift to be treasured and cultivated by all species. The chamber stirred with surprise. Full membership was rarely granted so quickly. The process usually took decades, sometimes centuries. But these were not usual times. One by one, representatives rose to signal their support. The Morathi clicked their mandibles in agreement. The Sylphs shimmered with approval. Even the Nebulari, usually the most cautious of species, pulsed with affirmative colors. The vote is unanimous, Morvek announced. Humanity is hereby granted full membership in the Galactic Federation. May your stubbornness guide us all. General Chen accepted the pronouncement with a simple nod. She had never sought recognition. She had only done what needed to be done. But as she looked around the chamber, seeing the faces of so many different species united in respect and gratitude, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. Not the desperate hope of wartime, but the quiet hope of peace. After the ceremony, Ambassador Zyxthel found Chen in the garden, standing before a small flower that had been transplanted from Earth. It was a simple thing, a daisy, white petals surrounding a yellow center. Why this flower? Zyxthel asked. Of all the species on your world, why did you choose this one for the memorial? Chen smiled. Because it is stubborn. You can step on it, cut it down, poison the soil it grows in, and it keeps coming back. We call them weeds sometimes because they refuse to stay gone. She touched one of the petals gently. Humans are like weeds, Ambassador. We are not the strongest or the smartest or the most beautiful, but we are the most stubborn, and sometimes that is enough. Zyxthel considered this. In her 300 years of diplomatic service, she had learned many things about many species, but she had never met anyone quite like humans. General, she said, what will you do now? The war is over. Your enemies are defeated. What purpose does stubbornness serve in peacetime? Chen laughed. Oh, Ambassador, you still do not understand. Stubbornness is not just for war. It is for everything, for building, for healing, for growing, for loving, for all the 1,000 things that make life worth living. She turned to face the older diplomat. The Kreth were just one challenge. The universe is full of challenges, and now that the Federation has learned to be stubborn, we can face them together. Zyxthel felt her secondary heart beating faster. She had spent her career maintaining peace, avoiding conflict, seeking diplomatic solutions to every problem. But Chen was right. There was more to stubbornness than fighting. There was the stubbornness to keep hopping when hope seemed foolish. The stubbornness to keep loving when love brought pain. The stubbornness to keep living when life was hard. Teach me, she said, surprising herself. Teach me to be stubborn. Chen's smile widened. Ambassador, you already are. You insisted on observing the war despite the danger. You proposed human membership despite centuries of tradition. You are standing here talking to me when most of your colleagues are at the reception eating and drinking. She placed a hand on Zyxthal's shoulder. Stubbornness is not something we can give you. It is something you find within yourself. We just helped you see it. The two of them stood together in the garden watching the flowers bloom. Around them the galaxy went on. Ships flew. Worlds turned. Life continued. And in the great database of the Galactic Federation, a new entry had been added to the list of strategic resources. Human stubbornness. Value, incalculable. Applications, unlimited. Availability, ask any human. It would remain there for 10,000 years. A reminder to all who came after that the greatest weapon in the universe was not technology or strength or even intelligence. It was the simple, powerful, utterly human refusal to give up. In the years that followed, the Federation entered a new era. The threat of the Kreth had unified species that had been divided for millennia. The lessons of human stubbornness had changed how they approached every challenge. When a virus threatened to wipe out the nebulari, scientists worked for years without rest until they found a cure. When an asteroid threatened the Sylph homeworld, engineers found a way to redirect it against all odds. When diplomatic negotiations between the Veloran and the Morathi broke down for the 100th time, mediators simply refused to accept failure. General Chen retired from active service but never stopped working. She traveled the galaxy, teaching, advising, planting the seeds of stubbornness wherever she went. She became a legend not for her victories, but for her refusal to admit defeat. "How do you keep going?" a young Morathi cadet asked her during a lecture. "After everything you have seen, everything you have lost, how do you still believe?" Chen smiled, the same smile she had worn on the Bridge of the Hope as they charged into the Kreth swarm. "Because I am too stubborn to stop believing," she said. "Because every time I think about giving up, I remember all the people who did not give up so that I could be here, and I refuse to let them down." She looked out at the cadets, young beings from a dozen species, and saw the future of the Federation. "You will all face moments when giving up seems like the only option, when every calculation says you cannot win, when every voice tells you to surrender." She leaned forward, her eyes bright. "In those moments, remember this. The universe does not get to decide when you are beaten. You do. And as long as you refuse to accept defeat, as long as you keep fighting, keep hopping, keep living, you have not truly lost." The cadets listened, and something changed in them. Something small but powerful. A seed of stubbornness, planted by a human who had spent her life refusing to give up. Captain Theatrix of the Sylph, who had survived his wounds and returned to active service, was in the audience that day. He had never forgotten the moment when he decided to ram his ship into the Kreth swarm. It had been the most terrifying and the most liberating moment of his life. After the lecture, he approached General Chen. "I never thanked you," he said, "for teaching us to be stubborn." Chen shook her head. "You always had it in you, Captain. All we did was help you see it." "Perhaps," Theatrix said, "but seeing it made all the difference." They stood together in comfortable silence, two veterans of a war that had changed everything. Around them, the next generation prepared to face whatever challenges the universe would throw at them. And they would face them stubborn. 100 years later, long after General Chen had passed away, the anniversary of the Kreth War was celebrated across the Federation. Statues had been erected on 1,000 worlds. Songs were sung in 100 languages. The story of how the galaxy learned to be stubborn was taught to every child. But the greatest memorial was not a statue or a song. It was the attitude of the beings who lived in the Federation. The Veloran who pursued diplomatic solutions long after others would have given up. The Morathi who rebuilt their worlds after natural disasters with tireless determination. The Sylph who spread across the galaxy despite their fragile crystalline forms. They had all learned the lesson. They had all caught the disease of stubbornness, and they were all better for it. Ambassador Zeichsthal, now ancient and honored, gave the centennial address to the council. 100 years ago, we faced extinction, she said. We were saved not by superior weapons or brilliant strategy, but by a simple quality that one species possessed in abundance and shared with us all. She gestured to the portrait of General Chen that hung in the chamber. Sarah Chen taught us that stubbornness is not a limitation. It is not a character flaw. It is the most powerful force in the universe. The force that builds civilizations. The force that overcomes impossible odds. The force that says to the darkness, not today. She paused, her eyes sweeping over the assembled representatives. Today we are all stubborn. We are all human in the way that matters most. We are all beings who refuse to accept defeat. And that, more than any weapon or technology, is what makes us strong. The chamber erupted in applause. Representatives from 73 species, united by a gift that humanity had given them, the gift of refusing to give up. In the garden beneath the great chamber, the daisies from Earth still bloomed. They had been carefully cultivated for a century, spreading across the memorial grounds, pushing up through cracks in the stone, thriving in soil that had never known them before. Stubborn flowers in a stubborn galaxy, in a universe that had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes, the only thing standing between defeat and victory is the simple, powerful, utterly magnificent refusal to surrender. And that was how human stubbornness became the most precious strategic resource in the galaxy, not because humans were special, but because they taught everyone else that they could be special too. That stubbornness was not a human trait. It was a choice that anyone could make. A choice that changed everything.